All right. Hi there, everybody. Um, Welcome to Mahamudra for the People. For those who are new, and I see that there are a couple of new folks here, this is a weekly teaching that usually I give on Mahamudra. And if we're lucky, we get to do a little bit of practice as well. So I'd like to welcome everyone here today and was hoping that we could um, sit for about 10 minutes. So as we do, and as we do with this particular practice, take a little bit of time to allow your body to assume a comfortable pose or position. Uh, Allow yourself to check into your breathing and bring your awareness to the present moment. And use whatever meditation instruction with respect to Mahamudra that you are familiar with doing. For those who are brand new to the practice, allow yourself to use your breath as an anchor and allow yourself to settle into the awareness of every inhalation and exhalation. For those with more experience, let's see if we can use everything that arises as a way of anchoring our mind. And we'll sit like this for about 10 minutes. So gently bring yourself back to this community gathered here. And take a little moment to reflect on what that was like. I'd like to start off by checking in to see if there are any questions left over from last week or from your practice over the past week. So if you want to, you can ask a question. There's a little tab on the bottom where you can type something in the chat box on the side. And as we, maybe I'll wait a moment for anything to come in. I'd actually like to spend some of the session on a text that I shared at some point during we had this crazy thing for the sun cycle that we did with Bhumi's Parsha. I guess it was in early June, or maybe even late May. It was called our Kumbh Mela, our kind of, it was a 24-hour practice and teaching session that, some of the community came together to lead, and I offered a couple of things. And one of the sessions was a Mahamudra for the people, and I recall it was quite late, so there were some people who were participating in that who I know are not here, so I want to maybe spend a little bit of time on an instruction that comes from Mipam Rinpoche, and Mipam Rinpoche lived in it's in the 1800s, late 19th century. He died in 1912, and he was a Nyingma teacher, although he held what is known as the remade tradition. So basically, he came from a tradition where they honored and practiced and respected all of the schools of Vajrayana that one finds in Tibet. So briefly, that's the Gelug lineage, the Sakya lineage, the Kagyu lineages, and of course the Nyingma lineage, and then smaller lineages like the Jonangpa and all of that. So anyway, Mipam Rinpoche was a great practitioner, and also had a very brilliant mind and composed a number of texts on a number of topics. But there's this one really beautiful one on Mahamudra that I'd like to share with everybody. So, as we've done in the past, I was hoping that everybody could just take a little bit of time, and what I'll do is I'll read this, and again, just let whatever sound, whatever happens from the sound kind of hitting your eardrum, being cognized into, some kind of knowledge experience in the moment. Let that propel you into whatever kind of experience that might arise. So sit as comfortably as you can. If it helps to close your eyes, you can close your eyes. And just let the sound come in. And I'm going to read this. It's basically a page and a half. And then obviously, if anybody has questions, you can chime in as you like with them, and I'll address those as they come in. But I'll also kind of teach a little bit, on this text. So this text is called The Instruction on Stillness, Occurrence, and Awareness in Mahamudra. And this is by Mipam Rinpoche. If you can simply practice Mahamudra and experience stillness, occurrence, and awareness according to the vital instruction of that practice, you will ultimately perceive the truth of reality. This is because the nature of your mind has the Sujata essence. Apply the key instruction concerning it. The basis of all things is mind. After understanding the mind's secret, seek the vital point of your mind, and you will become skilled in all things and realize the meaning of egolessness. Since I am teaching in accordance with the oral instructions of the realized ones, I will leave out various logical examinations. Stillness is when you look into your mind, direct yourself inward, and remain devoid of any kind of thinking. Occurrence is when various kinds of thoughts move. Awareness is your mind being aware of either of these. If you maintain this continuously, you will come to understand this vital point. Various feelings such as joy and sadness arise from your own mind and dissolve back into that mind. Understanding this, you will come to recognize that all experiences are the personal experiences of your mind. Subsequently, by looking directly into the essence of your mind, whether it is still or thinking, you will understand that it is empty and does not possess any entity whatsoever, even though it perceives many things. This so-called emptiness is not blank emptiness like space. Rather, you will come to understand that it is an emptiness endowed with the supreme of all aspects. That means it does not possess any self-nature, yet it has an unceasing clarity which is fully conscious and cognizant. When realizing this secret point of mind, to experience the natural, luminous, and innate mind essence, although there is no separate watcher and something watched, it is recognizing awareness. This is what is pointed out in Mahamudra and Dzogchen. According to Saraha, if you can sustain it, you will look again and again into the primordially pure nature of space, and seeing will cease. As stated in the Prajnaparamita, mind is devoid of mind. The nature of mind is luminous. There is nothing easier than this. It is essential to practice. Composed by Mipam Mangalam. So take a moment to let whatever that is causing to arise. Let that arise without attachment or without aversion. Just let it be. If anybody has any questions about this, please feel free to chime in. So the reason why I wanted to share this is, this comes from a book called The Crystal Cave, a compendium of teachings of the practice lineage. That's Sri Singha on the cover, great Dzogchen master. It's published by Rongjung Yeshe. I first actually was introduced to this book by my root teacher in Sikkim in 1995. And all of the texts within this book mainly deal with either Mahamudra or Dzogchen. And my root teacher, Tsuma Deten Zangmo, was a very adept Mahamudra teacher, and she thought that some of these texts would be beneficial to reflect on and use as a guide. And really, some of the best ways to contextualize books like this is that they're they should be regarded as like signposts on the road to liberation. So that means that we relate to these texts, we're inspired by these texts, we interact with these texts, and yet we don't hold on to them the same way we don't hold on to a stop sign, or we don't hold on to a sign that says Kathmandu in 50 miles. We don't, while driving, we don't stop and like freak out and hold on to the sign and say, oh my God, the sign is everything, and just stop there. We just know to keep going, and that eventually we'll reach our destination. Texts like this are so compelling sometimes that we want to hold on to them because sometimes they're more clear than we are. And yet, it's important to remember that, like all things, we need to be mindful of attachment and how becoming attached to Dharma texts, better than perhaps being attached to other things, on a continuum, still falls short of, actually experiencing the definitive kind of experience of nature of mind. And back when I was first introduced to these, my teacher wouldn't let me go down to there's a sweet shop that also had a copy machine, and she wouldn't let me photocopy it. She made me copy this out by hand until years later I was able to get a copy. So there is a question here. You read "Secret of the Mind." Is that secret, is that secret equal to the mind is self-sustaining, self-existing, and luminous, and not dependent on anything else? So this is a somewhat controversial question in the sense that a self-existing mind, right? Some people, within the context of the Buddhist tradition, especially in the context of Buddhist philosophy, would say that mind is not self-existing. That kind of aligns more with Atman that we find kind of in the Hindu tradition. The secret of mind aspect that this points out is, and I'm going to read this section one more time. When realizing the secret point of mind, to experience the naturally luminous and innate mind essence, although there is no separate watcher and something watched, is recognizing awareness. This is what is pointed out in Mahamudra and Dzogchen. So this point is not that mind is the self-existing, self-sustaining thing. However, it is luminous and not dependent on anything else, in the sense that mind is the ground upon which everything arises, right? But the first line, basically the first line, although there is no separate watcher and something watched. So this kind of, helps point out that when we're able to rest in awareness, truly, then we are, what we shift into is an experience where there is no division between that which is experiencing and that which is experienced, because everything is basically of the same nature. Everything is the expression of mind, and part of the quality, or one of the qualities of mind, is this ability to know itself, which is what awareness is, right? And so what this rather points out to, outside of a, what it's pointing out is that there is no self-existing quality everything arises, almost like everything might arise in a mirror, or actually your screen of your device, whatever device you're using right now. Everything is arising, right? Or some things are arising. Sound is arising from your computer. Sight, visual objects are arising, and none of that is innate to the computer itself necessarily. Right? As I talk about Mahamudra and we hear the word Mahamudra, 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 the computer is not Mahamudra, right? The computer or phone or whatever is being used is the basis from which all of this experience is arising in the moment. Right? So similarly, our mind is the kind of basis from which this whole experience arises. When we're able to truly rest in awareness or in rigpa, then we end up having no distinction between self and other. Everything just becomes a unified field. So thank you for your question, Kari. The next question is, the passage alluded to times when the mind is empty and times when the mind is thinking. Can you talk about Mahamudra as it relates to sense perceptions? Absolutely. So I'm going to just come back to the text, and we're going to let the text guide us. So kind of the first instance of this particular point that the question is rooted in is with this this paragraph. Since I am teaching according to the oral instructions of the realized ones, I will leave out various logical examinations. Stillness is when you look into your mind, direct yourself inward, and remain devoid of any thinking. Occurrence is when various kinds of thoughts move. Awareness is your mind being aware of either of these. Right? So, and then the next paragraph I'll just read as well. If you maintain this continuously, you will come to understand this vital point. Various feelings such as joy and sadness arise from your own mind and dissolve back into that mind. Understanding this, you come to recognize that all experiences are the personal experience of your mind. And then by looking directly into the essence of your mind, whether it be still or thinking, you will understand that it is empty and does not possess any entity whatsoever, even though it perceives many things. This so-called emptiness is not blank emptiness like space. Rather, you will come to understand that it is an emptiness endowed with the supreme of all aspects. That means it does not possess any self-nature, and yet it has an unceasing clarity, which is fully conscious and cognizant. Right? So the clarity aspect of mind is that which allows us to be able to recognize and understand, appreciate, and remain aware of whatever it is that's arising in the moment. And so this can be thought activity. It could be the expression of emotion. Right? It could be the kind of quote-unquote flare-up of kleshas, jealousy, ignorance, pride, attachment, aversion. In the first paragraph that I recited, this one about stillness and occurrence and awareness. So when we look directly into mind, and in this particular instruction, we're not looking like into mind as if we have a microscope or something, or binoculars. We're looking into mind in the sense that we're just resting naturally with an awareness of what's arising. And as we become more practiced in this, our awareness focuses less on the obvious movement and distraction and whatever arises, right? And it allows us to begin to kind of, remain aware of that. But it's as if our awareness becomes a little bit more sophisticated and can hold everything that's arising in terms of thought activity and all of that as well as an appreciation or an awareness of the ground, so to speak, from which everything arises. Right? And as we subsequently become more practiced in being able to kind of hold both of these in a non-judgmental, um, you know, non-overly defining discursive way, we're just able to let things happen, then we begin to become practiced in understanding, genuinely understanding through our meditation, that a multitude of things arises. Every possible klesha combination, every possible thought activity, as well as lack of thought activity, right? All of that arises from the basis of mind. And that basis of mind is not a thing, right? It is not everything that arises from it. The same way, like, with the computer screen isn't me. I'm not even me. The computer screen isn't, me based on sound, because my sound isn't even me. Eventually we begin to understand that and this is kind of just metaphoric, is that it's as if the computer is primordially pure. Everything that comes out of it is variegated and this myriad display, but that display is not mind. That mind, when we begin to look, has no particular location, and yet at the same time, it can't not be located. We can't say it's not here. We can't say it's there. And so this is really what the crux of meditation in this context is. Now, when it relates to sense perceptions, it's very much the same thing. Like, I just had burned some incense, so there's still kind of the smell of incense in the air here, and I can allow my awareness to be able to appreciate and experience the kind of whole undulating nature of what that feels like in terms of my olfactory senses. And as I'm aware of that, all that is basically, this process of appreciating, maintaining awareness, noticing, having, a knowing relationship to that. And that's all. Yeah, it's not as if when I light incense, my mind smells differently. Again, with taste, so I'm drinking coffee, so I taste, the coffee. It tastes one way when it hits my tongue, another way as it passes through my mouth, another way as it goes down my throat, and then there's still kind of this constant change that's happening, right? When we're able to remain aware of that. And all of that is an arisal of appearance, right? The appearance of taste. Eventually that begins to dissipate and dissipate and dissipate. But that itself isn't the nature of mind. That's just something arising. Now, when we're able to maintain this, I don't want to use the word dispassionate, because it's not about that. And in fact, in the text, it says, well, it doesn't say that in this text. So the process of knowing, is really resting in awareness is really about resting in a state of natural freedom. And this kind of goes back a little bit to Talipa's 6 nails. Just allowing ourselves to not be, not to say, oh, God, that coffee reminds me of this or that, or, oh, it actually reminds me of coffee ice cream, or, oh, X, Y, and Z, or, oh, I can't wait to have another sip. Future-oriented. I'm having another sip right now. And then it's not, you don't analyze it, like, oh, I wonder, what is it about the quality of this taste that has made it this particular way? So the awareness is just basic, the maintenance of presence with whatever it is that's arising. And again, it's very easy to also then, as part of our maintenance of awareness of what's happening in any particular moment, to catch ourselves falling into these kind of klesha habits of attraction, aversion, and ignorance, right? The 3 poisons. So, the attraction is like, oh my God, I want more of this. This is so good, because it is so good, and I enjoy it. Or it's like, maybe I've got a slightly upset stomach, and coffee doesn't feel good, and that's like, oh, I can't take it, or I'm already feeling a little agitated, and the caffeine is too much. Of course, the ignorance is just like, that dullness that prevents us from being able to see things clearly. So as all of the senses arise, right, sound, I'm sitting in a wooden chair that's a little old, so it creaks. I could, easily say, oh, this chair it's annoying to sit in this chair, or, whatever. Resting in awareness is basically the practice of letting everything arise unobstructedly. I think that's another really important piece too, is to allow everything to arise in an unobstructed way. And that requires us to begin to have a little bit of acceptance of what's happening in the moment. It's hard to practice Mahamudra if we're going to be really tight in the way we relate to the definitions of things. Or if we don't let things happen freely. And so this kind of very nicely kind of relates to some ideas around the conduct that's helpful for Mahamudra. So within the context of Mahamudra practice, we don't want to affect things. This practice is not about changing anything. The practice is about remaining in direct relationship with whatever's arising. The practice is invitational in the sense that when a particular thought train arises, or a mental image might arise, if we're kind of a more visual person, we might hear a sound or smell a smell or whatever that is we're not too happy about. Right? We don't push it away. We don't change it. We don't try and visualize it away. Like there's a fire truck honking right now. Because I live not that far from a firehouse. And that's just sound. It can be loud. It might not be the kind of thing you want when you have a migraine. And yet, the process of blocking it is an exertion. It's this kind of dualistic binary relationship. It's an exertion of energy in a way that's not really necessarily useful or realistic, even. We can just rest in the sound. I don't have a headache now, so I don't have to rest in the pain. But if I did, then I would be resting in the union of pain and sound, which is something that we have to do sometimes. So I really love this this text because it's just very clear. and I especially love, one of the, and this might be a frustrating point perhaps, but uh, there is a, um, so, the last paragraph is, according to Saraha, if you can sustain it, you will look again and again into the primordially pure nature of space, and all seeing will cease. As stated in the Prajnaparamita, mind is devoid of mind. The nature of mind is luminous. So pain cannot hear. So, we need to come back again and again and again and again and again in our practice. And so, the practice itself, and Mipam says that, he says there's nothing easier than this. It is essential to practice. This is not a particularly difficult practice. What is difficult, though, is having a truly open and accepting relationship to whatever arises. And it's fascinating just to observe. Like, I don't mean for this to be extrapolated any which way, but when we are focused on creating change to make the world a different and better place, in a sense, we are changing things around us. And that process can be beautiful, and it can also be frustrating. We can experience anger in relationship to injustice or ignorance. And we can also sometimes operate from a place of violence in trying to create change. And the really powerful thing about Mahamudra is it kind of brings us back into the space of simply abiding in the moment without changing, without agitating, just maintaining direct experience of what's arising, which typically is really hard to do because we're when we're born, we arise into, and it's not just America, wherever we're born into a system of conceptual projection onto phenomena, right? And so sometimes that's culture. It manifests as ourselves in relationship to the experience and arisal of culture. And sometimes, we're born into systems, and then we're kind of, have to cope with the projections of ethics. And again, I'm not saying we should not be ethical or, just do whatever we want, but like these ethical views. So, like, take for example, the United States. Whether we like it or not, this is an Abrahamic, our culture is rooted in an Abrahamic way of conceiving about right and wrong, and or, for example, life, and when we begin to rest more in Mahamudra, we begin to see that actually, while, there may be some aspect of utility in all of us having some kind of shared set of moral values, a lot of these are we can see how they don't really necessarily match up with the way that everything arises, right? The way that we experience the world, maybe the way that we experience ourselves in relationship to the world and who we truly are. The practice of Mahamudra asks us to sit and experience and come back to these experiences time and again with each session. Come back to it. Come back to the basic experience of what's happening in this moment. And then cultivating a sense of equanimity and abiding within that experience. And that's what, Saraha and Mipam are talking about. It's just come back to this basic point. And through doing this, then we begin to experience what is typically termed in the tradition as certainty. We begin to know things definitively. And when we know things definitively, it's said that it's definitive because it arises out of our experience. Right? We know it for sure, not just because we wrote it in the beautiful book. Although the beautiful book can be, it could be helpful. So I just want to check in. How is this sounding to people? I think maybe we all fell asleep. Or maybe everyone's practicing Mahamudra so well that there's nothing to arise within us because everything is just naturally liberated. Yeah, well, there's Jessica. Does anyone have any questions? All right. So I'm going to just read this one more time. Again, after having well, you know what? This is very strange. I just opened up to a random page, and there's another Mipam text. And again, this one is short as well. So I'm going to read this one. And this is good because it's on sustaining the nature of awareness, which I think will be helpful. So again, just kind of sit back into your seat and get as comfortable as you need to be. Allow your body to be at ease and your mind to be at ease. And let yourself interact with whatever sound comes out of my mouth in a way that's meaningful. So this is entitled The Essence of Wakefulness by Mipam Rinpoche, a method in sustaining the nature of awareness. Homage to the glorious primordial protector. When sustaining the nature of awareness, the three stages of recognizing, training, and attaining stability will gradually occur. First of all, scrutinize the naked and natural face of awareness by means of your master's oral instructions until you see it free from assumptions. Having resolved it with certainty, it is essential that you simply sustain the nature of just that. It is not enough to just recognize it. You must perfect the training in the following way. You may already have recognized the face of awareness. You may have already recognized the face of awareness, but unless you rest just in that, conceptual thinking will interrupt it, and it will be difficult for awareness to appear nakedly. So, at that point, it is essential to rest without accepting or rejecting your thoughts, and to continue by repeatedly resting in the state of unfabricated awareness. When you have practiced this again and again, and the force of your thought waves weakens, while the face of your awareness grows sharper and it becomes easier to sustain. That is a time when you should abide in the meditation state as much as you can and be mindful of remembering the face of awareness during post-meditation. As you grow used to the strength of your awareness, train further. At first, when a thought occurs, you need not apply a remedy to stop it. By leaving it to itself, it is at some point naturally freed, just as the knot on a snake becomes untied by itself. When you become more adept, the occurrence of a thought will cause slight turmoil, but immediately vanish in itself, just like a drawing on the surface of water. When you train just in that, you gain experience that transcends benefit and harm, at which point thought occurrences cause no problem whatsoever. Thus, you will be free from hope or fear about whether or not bad thoughts do occur, just like a thief entering an uninhabited house. By practicing further, you perfect the training so that finally, your conceptual thinking and the all-ground, along with its moving force, dissolve into an unfabricated Dharmakaya. That is the attainment of the natural abode of awareness. Just as you cannot find any ordinary stones on an island of gold, even if you search for them, all that appears and exists will be experienced as the realm of Dharmakaya. Attaining stability is when everything has become all-encompassing purity. In the same way, just as conceptual thinking gradually falls under the power of awareness during the daytime, at night you do not need to apply some other instruction, but should simply understand how the recognition of dreams and the luminosities of the shallow and deep sleep correspond. Until you attain stability, by all means continue with undistracted diligence like the steady flow of a river. This was taught by Mipam. May virtuous goodness increase. And so this instruction also very clear, right? Mipam Rinpoche has this way of just cutting through. Sometimes it's cutting through like our ridiculous intellectual, need to make everything complicated. Oh, look at me, I'm so brilliant. It's like this and that and blah, blah, blah. Like, you could tell that he was a meditation master because of how accurately he captures the experience. And really, this is what I was referring to earlier in terms of the practice. First of all, scrutinize the naked and natural face of awareness by means of the oral instructions until you see it free from assumptions. So this really is just a really basic, simple way of coming back to our practice each time. Right? Coming back to everything that arises. Right? As everything arises, we maintain a naturally relaxed, settled sense of knowing that's rooted in the confidence that, of what we were discussing before, the fact that everything that arises in meditation simply arises. It arises out of the all-ground, aspect of mind, right, which is naturally luminous, naturally liberated, has no particular characteristics, and yet everything comes out of it. Right? And as we come back to knowing this, our practice deepens considerably. Having resolved it with certainty, it is essential that you simply sustain the nature of just that. So just coming back to the basic appreciation of what it means to be aware, to know, to experience everything that's happening. And I can't stress enough the sense of fearlessness that accompanies this, because we became the the otherness of everything that arises, it basically dissolves. It's not that we are the thoughts that arise, but everything that arises throughout our meditation experience is so intimately connected to the nature of mind. And everything just, it happens. And while at times it feels real in ways that may trigger us, it's important to recognize that it's merely empty experience, empty appearance. It comes and it goes. And Mipam has this great line here. At first, when a thought occurs, you need not apply a remedy to stop it. By leaving it just to itself, it is at some point naturally freed, just as the knot on a snake becomes untied by itself. Now, the knot on the snake being untied by itself is a bit of a kind of shout out to the story of Naropa. And there's this point when Tilopa is teaching Naropa through a series of non-verbal kind of symbolic acts. And one of them is he puts in front of Naropa a snake that's tied in a knot. And unlike a piece of rope or string or thread or whatever, which can't untie itself, the snake unties itself, right? And that is a teaching on the fact that for the unpracticed meditator, everything that arises is basically like a bunch of knots. There's tightness, there's reactivity, there's attachment and aversion and ignorance, which completely disallow us from letting everything arise unimpededly because we're just reacting, we're chasing after everything that happens, right? But then, over time, as we begin to develop a quote unquote, a confidence or even, a vocabulary for being able to understand the way thought occurrence occurs, happens, arises, then things very naturally kind of untie themselves. Because, we learn, just because we think of something nasty, right? Like murder, that we're a murderer, or that we're bad, or we think of, we're human, right? And so all of us experience desire, let's say. And so within a natural arising experience of desire, it does not make us bad people, right? The process of letting the desire untie itself is just whatever desire arises, watching, staying in relationship with it, non-reacting, and eventually it shifts. There's not a lot of effort that necessarily needs to go into it. In the beginning, there is effort. Or at least the need, this kind of automatic need to feel like, I need to actually put an antidote or a remedy in place to be able to change this experience into something more awakened. And that need to make the experience more awakened is rooted in having this, misunderstanding in relationship to mind. As we've said in other sessions, the mind is primordially pure all the time. It was when you were born, it was when you were 2 years old, and 5 years old, and 7 years old, and 20 years old, and however old you are right now. The mind's nature has never changed. It's this pure, luminous, expansive, free, self-liberated mind. Within the context of the Mahayana tradition, there is no difference between your mind and the mind of the Buddhas. And yet we continually fail to appreciate that that's the case. and we let that sense of brokenness and constant struggle with everything that arises in our own minds, to the extent that we're constantly exhausting ourselves. We're creating heaps and heaps and heaps of samsaric pain and suffering and anxiety and agitation and all of that. So then Mipam goes on to say, when you become more adept, the occurrence of thought will cause a slight turmoil, but immediately vanish in itself, like the drawing on the surface of water. Right? So, the moment you draw on water, or even like very wet sand, like I was at the beach yesterday, like, when the sand is very wet, everything just kind of comes back, everything fills itself back in, right? When we're more practiced, thought occurrence happens, right? And it happens, and then it's self-liberated, right? There's not really a big deal. There's no antidote that we need to apply to fill it in. It's not like we need a little dump truck to fill everything in, or a shovel to go in and kind of cover up all the stuff that our thoughts have created. So Wambui asks a question: how to care for strong emotions within the instructions / practice of Mahamudra when the nervous system is jacked up on stress hormones? This is a good question, and it's very real. I've had a very strange week of being jacked up on stress, so I can totally identify. So, Mahamudra is the kind of practice where, I think we could say it's a practice rooted in pragmatism, and also should be rooted in self-care. Somehow, in some contexts, but I think maybe in more contexts than we're willing to admit, this is a very Western thing. We kind of really love and value. Hopefully, we value this less and less over time. This kind of idea is rooted, I think, definitely in the capitalist kind of way of approaching things in general, but also probably the colonial kind of ways of approaching things, where we have to really fucking work hard all the time. And if we're not just like giving it our all, or 110% at all times, we're not really doing whatever it is that we're doing. And also rooted in this is this assumption that if I put X amount of energy into something, it will yield, X amount of result, and I want those results. I really want to get enlightened, I want it bad, so bad. I'm going to work so hard. I'm going to liberate everybody, And the irony is that I don't think it works that way. I think that the reality of the situation is, as meditators, one of the things that really helps us is understanding how to relax into the moment. And when in Tilopa Six Nails, the relax, rest, and relax, the last of the six nails, is not necessarily a, it doesn't arise out of, we could say, the wellness traditions, in the way that we commonly know them. The relax, rest, and relax is really about, adopting a softness in relationship to our practice. And that softness is partially rooted in a pragmatism that arises from sustained practice, coming back to everything, coming back. When we have a sustained practice, then we're able to see, even when our mind is reactive in relationship to stress, or the presence of stress causes us to not be able to hold time and things that need to get done and expectations very well, that we then have a real hard time accomplishing anything, or a hard time even just being able to relate to today, like this moment, because I've got so much to do. I'm like so busy. This is so crazy. Blah 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 blah. You know, so part of the softness in Mahamudra is recognizing that like this is my mind freaking out, and it is freaking out because I'm having a really hard time letting things arise. I am chasing after them. Everything is arising at one time, and I'm becoming angry and upset about that. Like, why is this happening this way? Right? So there are several things we can do. We can engage in self-care. My root teacher was really big, and I've said this before, I think many times, on taking naps, right? And it's not like a quaint instruction. There's actually a lot of wisdom in learning how, when we're relaxed, we're able to step into the moment in a more expansive way. And if we think that we need to burn the candle at both ends, eventually that will catch up to us, and we will become increasingly agitated. We'll be much less resilient in our practice, so we won't be able to hold the complexity of what happens when in just maintaining awareness of whatever it is that's arising. And kind of coming back to Wambu's question, there is this there's this point here. So when you train in just that, you gain experience that transcends benefit and harm, at which point thought occurrences cause no problem whatsoever. Thus, you will be free from hope and fear about whether or not thoughts do occur, just like a thief entering an uninhabited house. By practicing further, you perfect the training so that finally your conceptual thinking and the all ground, so the alaya consciousness, right, from which everything arises, right, along with its moving force, dissolve into unfabricated Dharmakaya. That is the attainment of the natural abode of awareness. Just as you cannot find any ordinary stones on an island of gold, even if you search for them, all that appears and exists will be experienced as the realm of Dharmakaya. Attaining stability is when everything has become all-encompassing purity. So, within this question, I just want to come back to it. I think it's gone. The difficult experience, especially like in a profoundly difficult emotion as it arises, is not something to fear, as a Mahamudra practitioner. In fact, that's something to bring to this experience right now, right? And just let it arise. What does that mean? How do we experience that? What does that do to us? Like, how do we physiologically respond? And I think that the interesting thing is that, and I don't mean anything unduly harsh to kind of the general wellness world, because I run a division for Department of Correction that's chaplaincy and staff wellness. So I'm attuned to the need. However, there's this very interesting distinction that arises between kind of a deep practice of Mahamudra and the need to maybe keep things at bay that are stressors. And the practice of Mahamudra at some point invites us to walk into very difficult spaces, like, for example, we kind of act out in the practice of Che, where we are gently nudged into encountering, the intensity of mind, when we're tired out and feeling stressed and maybe feeling angry or feeling sad or overwhelmed. That those things are not, that we don't quote unquote resolve them in our meditation practice by pushing them away. We actually, again, just like this initial instruction, when a thought or experience, klesha, arises, you need not apply a remedy to stop it. By leaving it to itself, at some point naturally, it becomes naturally freed, just like the knot on a snake becomes untied by itself. So we also need to be kind of realistic, and if we're starting off on the path, we don't have to jump into like going to a coroner's office or something particularly intense. But we benefit by stepping into this practice with the intention of not pushing away difficulties as they arise. And then simultaneously knowing how and when to care for ourselves when it's just counterintuitive. If I haven't eaten in 15 hours and I'm under a considerable amount of stress and I'm tired, right, I'm going to not react as well as I would want to. And knowing that, then it behooves us to recognize that and take a break, right? To get some sleep, to do something soothing, to take a moment for ourselves so that we don't just jump right into this habit, which is very unconscious, of constantly reacting to everything. As our practice develops, we can kind of slowly, almost like, folding flour into eggs if we're going to bake, if we've got our eggs whipped up and everything, like you need to gently fold that in for baking a cake. You can't violently do it, or you can't just like throw it in and just be like, you're done. It takes a little bit of effort and a little bit of, artfulness to be able to do that. So Cooper writes, can you talk more about the luminosity of the mind or nature of mind? I think I get caught up on thinking about visible light when I hear this luminous description. Yeah, that's a very common thing, and I also kind of went through that too at one point, where you're just like, okay, like when does it all get light? It still doesn't seem, it's not different than it was before. So the luminosity piece is best described as, so the mind is, when it's described as luminous, it's almost as if everything that arises, okay, like a prism. So a prism in and of itself is completely clear. Right? It's translucent, transparent, and if you hold a prism up to your eye, you can see right through it. Maybe because of the facets, it might just distort some of your vision, right? But it's inherently clear. And yet, as light passes through the prism in a particular way, the colors are split, and one is able to see this range of color, all of these colors, which naturally arise out of quote-unquote white light, and so in that way, everything arises. Yeah, that's a really good comment, Jamandria, thank you. That everything arises out of mind, out of the experience of mind. Right? So every possible range of emotion, every possible thought, from the most peaceful, beautiful, to the most horrid, violent, everything in between. every sense faculty is experienced through mind. Every beautiful and attractive and ethereal smell and taste and touch, and then every vile, polluting, um, repelling smell, taste, or touch. And they arise out of this experience of mind, which has a quality of being able to hold it all, right? It's almost as if, and again, it gets a little weird, I guess, when we end up using, too many metaphors, because it becomes easy to kind of project onto mind as being like this. It's just like that. But I think the prism is a good one. In other kind of traditional metaphors, they'll use mirrors. So like everything arising either out of the mirror or the reflection on something. So there are some practices where one might stand or sit in front of a mirror, right, and understand that the image, the reflection that we're seeing, is not real, right? It's not real. It's a reflection. It's not the same form, that I happen to inhabit at this particular time. It's arising, due to the luminosity of the mirror. So, in a sense, you could say that it's reflective, or as Jamandra points out, this tatata oso, so oso is light, right? And it's just kind of this liberated Buddha nature ground upon which everything arises. It's mind can hold an infinite array of experiences, and when we look at our experience, even just experience of a meditation session, and again, there is absolutely no judgment on what arises, because everything does arise for all of us at different points in time. The range it's incredible. Some of our best thoughts and some of our worst thoughts, some of our kindest thoughts and some of our most selfish thoughts, some of our expressions of liberated, compassionate activity, and some of our most self-obsessed, intensely nasty sides of ourselves. So Wambui is going because her kids are running wild. So thank you, Wambui, for being here. So Cooper, does that help? I may have put him to sleep. Okay. Yay. We have a little bit more time. We've got about 10 minutes. Does anyone have any other questions? So the, oh, yes, I think so. Or no. So the most important thing in our practice is allowing ourselves to come back to time and time again with each session to the experience of what this mind, the nature of mind, actually is. And I think it's really important. We don't have to run away from scary thoughts. We need to be realistic. I mean, if things are getting really difficult, then we can stop and take care of ourselves. We don't need to torture ourselves. Our practice is, the root of not only our own liberation, but our ability to aid in liberating others. And there's not a lot of utility in really pushing ourselves to unduly harsh places in order to hone that. So, taking care of ourselves, napping, resting, practicing in short sessions. So I do know that for some people we become kind of addicted to this idea of productivity, or the length of time you meditate is really the test of how good you are. But Mipam points out that really the most important thing is coming back to this experience of being able to allow whatever arises arise and be self-liberated in the moment. Because everything is self-liberated in the moment. That's the true nature of every particular thought, every particular emotion, every particular klesha, every particular chain or thread of thought is inherently pure. It's inherently liberated. And yet, our typical experience is that we're kind of pushed and pulled in different directions on the sea of judgment. Around I want to be connected with this. Oh no, I don't want to be connected with that. Oh, this is a good thought. Oh, that's a bad thought. To sever at the root this kind of relationship to attachment and aversion and ignorance is really, the power of Mahamudra. When we sever that root, we sever our really gross and intense addiction towards concepts. Again, concepts as well are naturally liberated, right? Through justice is a wonderful concept. Liberation is a wonderful concept. Healing is a wonderful concept. All of these things are important, right? And yet, each one of these things can become chains that bind us when we relate to them in an overly dualistic way. And so, oh good, so the book has been reprinted. Yeah, the one that I have is, I don't know, it was a little hard to get back when I got it. I guess it's like, the first edition, and it was kind of, I think, a small imprint, but that's great. So I encourage people to get this book, I guess. I'm not going to click on the link because I don't want to lose everyone. But if you do, I think it's important to remember that, to rely on the words, rely on the direction that is pointed out by the words, but don't etch them into your frame of reference point. So just let them guide you, but don't become attached. Because actually at one point I asked previous Bogo Rinpoche, about this book, and at that point in time he was like, he looked through the book, and then he looked at me, and he looked directly in my eyes, and I felt as if he saw like right through, not just right through me, but through time and space, right? And he said in that moment, yes, but be careful with the Dzogchen stuff. and why he said that was because the systems are similar and they're a little different, right? And so it can be helpful sometimes to read instructions like this, and it can also be a little confusing if they're different systems, because different systems are different, and there are ways that they're similar. And I think at the end of the day, you could say that they all get to the same point, but sometimes we don't want to confuse ourselves. So with that, I think we can end here. I really want to express a great deal of gratitude for all of you coming and participating in this series of talks. I very much enjoy them. I'm really inspired by your practice. And in this moment, I ask that any benefit from this particular session be dedicated to the immediate cessation of suffering for all sentient beings. I ask that we're able to be freed from our gross addiction with respect to conceptual thought and discursiveness. I ask that all of us are able to allow the mind of awakening to arise effortlessly, and from that space that we're able to bring all beings into an experience of complete liberation. And thank you all. May your practice flourish and bring benefit. See you next week.